Nope. Nope. Nope.
Hey guys, Clone Guy here, and today is Valentine's Day, so I thought I'd share with you my favorite tanks, tiers 1 through tier 10, the ones I love the most. Now, some days you may hear me say another tank is my favorite or not, but that's because this list does tend to change depending what day it is. But this is my overall favorites. I really had to think about it, and like, you know what? Which tanks mean a lot to me? Which ones do I like the most? And starting at number 1, at tier 1, is the Vickers Medium 1, and that's because this thing is literally like a 4005 at tier 1. You have these AP shells which can half health all tier 1s, and then these HE shells which can devastate if you're able to hit and pen with them, and it's just pretty devastating. I just remember having a whole lot of fun way back in the day, back when I first started in World of Tanks. This was one of those go-to tanks that I would go to have a whole lot of fun, because it is hilarious for sure. Now the first 3 games I'm going to show you guys, first tanks, I did not actually pull them out into public matches. I didn't feel right. So the first ones are going to be in Proving Grounds, but this is my favorite tier 1 tank in the game. At tier 2 we have the M2 Light, and this tank is fast, and it's another tech tree tank, and it's hilarious. You have this Hispano gun on it, which the T1 Cunningham used to have. It doesn't have that anymore, but it's just amazing. And this tank is so fast for its tier. It goes at 56 kilometers an hour with almost, I think, over 30 horsepower per ton on a tier 2 tank. And it just allows you to rip around the battlefield. It plays much like the Lux does, but at a lower tier. So if you like the gameplay of the Lux or the tier 5 Leopard or the SP1C, then you're probably really gonna love this thing. And plus, it even has armor to show for it. Yes, this thing has a little bit of armor, and it's angled really weirdly, and tanks will be bouncing off of you. I was actually playing up against one of these on PC yesterday, and in my little tier 2 Rinkadink, I could not pen it because I was playing stock. And this is a light tank that goes at 56 kilometers an hour and can clip me out. So, this tank is at number 2 for me in the top 10. Well, I guess it's number 1 at tier 2. So this is at tier 2 for me in these 10 favorite tanks that I love the most. At tier 3 we have the Panzer 1C. Who here is surprised by that? Probably nobody. And this thing rips around at 79 kilometers an hour, and it's got this 7.92 millimeter gun, which just unloads in this. It's amazing. It just goes for so long, and you can just have so much fun in this thing. The pen isn't great, but it's not about how good the tank is. It's about how fun the tank is, and this tank is, believe me, fun. And yeah, when you're able, and the reload is fast too. When you're able to just roll around 78 kilometers an hour, get around, get behind somebody, and then just go and then you just kill them. It's the most amazing thing ever, and it's hilarious. It is hilarious. There are plenty of tier 5s though in the game which you will not penetrate no matter what you do with your 38 millimeters of penetration. Is it 38? No, it's 33 or 34. Actually, I have the list right here. It is 33 millimeters of penetration. If you load premium, it is 43. There's nothing you can do if you're fighting against T-34s or Panzer 5.4s or tanks like that. You're pretty much doomed if you fight, especially KV-1 or a Bogatyr. Yeah, good luck fighting those. At tier 4, you may notice a trend here. Fast little tanks with machine guns. And yes, next on the list is the Lux. I mean, if you like the M2 Light and you like the SP1C, then you're gonna love the Lux. I mean, it's got this 3 centimeter, once again, just machine gun that just goes auto cannon, I think is actually what it is, and it is devastating to say the least. You can clip out pretty much. I think you have 300 alpha. Yeah, you have 300 alpha on this magazine, so you can clip out same tiers if you roll high enough or they have low enough health, and you can even clip out lower tiers, and then you can half health or devastate higher tiers with your magazine, and it is pretty gnarly. And plus, this tank has really good power to weight, and it goes 60 kilometers an hour, and it turns on a dime. You're so fast maneuverable in this thing. You can't not have a fun time in this. And it even has the ability to carry games, unlike the other ones, I would argue. Actually, the M2 Medium, I would argue, has the amazing capability of carrying games. But for a tank that has to fight tier 6s, this tank is phenomenal. Phenomenal at carrying games if you really need it to. If you play it safe, play it smart, you can have some serious fun in this thing and pull off some amazing games. At tier 5, we have my first quote-unquote top-tier tank. It is the Panzer III-4, and this thing is mobile, and it has really good armor. It has a fantastic gun, 10 degrees of gun depression, and good health for its tier at 480 hit points at tier 5. And this thing used to only have 400, and I think it was 20. Or was it 430? It was 420, I believe. And then they buffed it. And it also used to only have 50 millimeters of frontal hull armor. And then they buffed it. And it did not have 10 degrees of gun depression. I think it was only 8, and that was only over the sides. Now it has 10, I'm pretty sure, everywhere. And yeah, this thing is devastating, and it's a great tank. And it is not to be confused with the tier 5 Panzer V-4. This is a tech tree version. And when I said this used to be my first top tier tank, what I mean by that is there used to be a time when this tank didn't lead anywhere. So you had, you played it and you got to this tier and you're like, okay, now what? Nothing. That's it. You got to this tank and that was it. That was the end of the line. So this was the last tank in this branch. And so it was, quote unquote, my very first top tier tank. Next on the list is the first of 2 premium tanks on the list. At tier 6, we are looking at the T-34-85M, and this is a newer tank I've been playing, and holy cow, I love this thing, and I can't believe it's one of the least played tanks in the game, one of the least owned tanks in the game, because it is truly something special. On PC, this tank is known for being a stat patterns tank, and we have the same version of it here on console, so why don't people play it? I don't know, I guess it just wasn't advertised very much. And it's the regular T-34-85, except it has more hull armor, and a faster firing gun, and better gun handling. But it's slightly slower because it has the same engine with more armor, more weight added to it. So of course, it's not quite as fast as the regular T-34-85. This tank performs more, in my opinion, like the T-43, but you're at tier 6. The T-43 is a tier 7 vehicle that you can play and own. The tech tree, the Russian medium tech tree, and it is a beast. But this thing is a whole tier lower. If you put this up 1 tier and gave it like more health, it would be a tier 7. It literally would still be a tier 7. It is a beautiful machine, and I truly love it. And it's one of the easiest tanks in the game I think I've ever played to actually ace. People, for some reason, play it terribly, but this is definitely my favorite. It's very close, though. This tank and the Cromwell are 2 very close tanks. It's very difficult for me to decide which one I like better, but as of recently, I'm going to have to say this one is definitely my favorite tier 6 in the game. Tier 7, I'm sure, is going to be no surprise. It's the Dreadnought. You take already a loved KV-2, and you give it more mobility, and you give it a better gun. And what do you get? You get a favorite. This is definitely my favorite tier 7 tank. I already have more pools medals in this tank than I have had in the entire game. This tank just let me farm pools medals. I mean, 2 of them, so it's not that big of a deal. I already got a Colabanos medal in this. I already have insane amounts of high calibers in this thing. It's a disgusting vehicle. It's really good. You have these AP shells, 175 millimeters of penetration, with 700 alpha damage, which allows you to do things like this to tanks which are a whole tier higher than you. It is truly something to behold, and you still have the same old HE shells on the KV-2. You have a faster aim time on this. You're much more mobile with over 20 horsepower per ton, or something like that. Or is it 17? It's close to 20, I'm pretty sure. And so you just get up and you go in this tank, which is also something truly special about the vehicle. And it allows you, because of the gun handling, to snapshots in like that. I know he was super close, but in the regular KV-2, you never know where that's going to go. The circle doesn't get much bigger. It's truly just a beast to behold. And it's definitely my favorite tier 7. Hands down. It's my favorite tier 7 tank in this game. There's nothing that even comes close. Maybe except the Comet. The Comet's pretty close, yet again, a British medium tank, rearing its beautiful head, trying to get into the 2nd spot on my lists. Tier 8 is just this old, faithful tank with arguably the best turret in the game, tier for tier. It's the T-32. And this thing has a beautiful gun nowadays. It didn't have the greatest gun back in the day. with 198 pen and not very good gun handling, but that's been recently buffed. Actually, it was buffed in update 4.6, so not recently anymore. That's almost 2 years ago, but it now has better gun handling, much better gun handling. It no longer has .41 accuracy, it's like .38 or something, which is pretty good, and it no longer has 198 pen, and now has 218, which is really good for a tier 8 heavy tank. And you have 10 degrees of gun depression, and I already said better gun handling now, and it just makes this tank beautiful, and it's definitely my favorite. Now, it was already my favorite even before the buffs, and the reason this thing has such a special place in my heart is because this was the first tank that I actually learned how to play the game. The T-34, the American Heavies, were one of the first lines I ground, but I didn't get very far. I got to the T-29 because it was miserable to play stock, and I got stuck there for like a year or so. Finally, I ground through this, and it taught me how to go hull down, how to use ridge lines, how to use gun depression. Not to rely on your hull, but to rely on your turret armor more than your hull armor. And it really, really provided me with some good knowledge and skills of this game. And after I'd ground through this, the next tank lines I played were the Russian mediums. And believe it or not, the T-34 Tier 5 was the very first tank I had ever had Unicum stats in. Because I played it like this thing, where I wanted to get hull down, I wanted to hide my hull, I wanted to keep my gun shooting, I wanted to rocket back and forth so that they wouldn't have easy shots on my turret. And so the T-34 was the very first Unicum tank I ever played, the Russian Tier 5. And then the T-34-85, the very next one, was the very first Super Unicum tank I had ever played. It literally took one tier to get me from Unicum to Super Unicum, and it was mostly because of this tank, learning in this tank, which allowed me to get where I'm at today. And this is a very good teaching tank, and I love it, and I do completely recommend it, and it is my favorite Tier 8 in this game. At Tier 8, we have a tank which is arguably one of my favorite tanks in the game, period, and that is the E-75, which is a stinking beast. This tank already has insane amounts of frontal hull armor, a fantastic gun, and well, that's about it. But that's all you really need. And then they buffed this thing to go from 30 kilometers an hour up to 40, so now it performs much like a medium tank with a big gun and lots of armor. It almost makes the E-50 irrelevant nowadays because of this thing. And this thing is easily one of my favorite tanks, at least in the top 3 of my all-time favorite vehicles. And this thing really taught me how to play the game too. It didn't teach me so much how to go hull down, it taught me how to angle, how to side scrape. This was the tank I learned how to side scrape in and trade effectively. It's really good. And angle, when you aren't able to side scrape, it's definitely one of the best teaching tanks I had ever played in my life, and I highly, highly recommend it. And that's why it's in my top 3 and my very favorite Tier 9 tank in this game. You cannot go wrong with the brutality of the E-75. It is brutal. It's able to just get in enemy tanks' faces and block damage, absorb damage, take damage if you have to because of your health pool, and just dish out huge amounts of HP because of your 128mm gun doing 490 average and able to roll even up to 613 if you get lucky. This thing is a beautiful machine, and even though it's got a big gun, its gun handling isn't terrible with an accuracy of .38. That's nothing to shy away from. That's not that inaccurate at all for such a big gun, but that's because it's German. At Tier 10, we have the FV4202, arguably my favorite tank in the game in general. And this was already about my second favorite tank in the game way back in the day, back when it went 40 kilometers an hour, had a pretty cruddy turret, and didn't really have much special, anything special about it other than the Hess shells. But I love the Hess shells, and I love this tank, and it was, I think, my second favorite tank back then. Then they removed it, and it was out of the game for about 2.5 years, almost 3 years. It was not in this game, and we got petitions going, we had videos going, we had an operation going, trying to get the Wargaming to bring it back, and they did. And boy, did they bring it back! They brought it back and made it go, instead of 40 kilometers an hour, it now goes 50 kilometers an hour, and they buffed its turret armor. Its roof of the turret is now impenetrable. If you're on level playing field, and if you're using your gun depression, it's even better. It's 466mm of effective armor. It's 290mm angled back at like a 69-degree angle. It's disgusting. And then next to the gun, it's also about 340 effective. It's just under the gun you have to go through. The upper plate is angled back at a hyper angle, making it about 300mm of effective armor. And yeah, this tank is a stinking beast. And because of those buffs and the fact that it's such a novel tank, a tank that I loved and I missed, it made me want it even more when they re-released it. And so I do have to say that this is my favorite tank of all time. Close behind it is the FE215B and the E75, though at tier 10 this definitely takes the cake. It's a monster of a tank. It's got over 20 horsepower per ton as well, giving it a better horsepower per ton than the Leopard 1. In fact, it has better ground resistances than the Leopard 1. This used to have the best ground resistances in the game. Now, there are some light tanks in the game that do have better ground resistances, but it still does have phenomenal mobility, and it just allows you to do what you need to do, and you have good rate of fire, a phenomenal 105, the L7 Royal Ordnance 105mm gun, which is one of my favorite, if not my favorite guns in this game. It's phenomenal. And it just allows you to do things like this. Track people, put shells where you want them to. If you miss your shots in this, it's usually your fault. Except, you know, update 4.12. But, you know, in this game, right here, our guns seem to work very, very well. Well, that's it. Those are my favorite tanks at each and every tier of this game. I hope you all enjoyed. If you did, slap that like button, comment, subscribe. Let me know what other kind of top 10s or top 7s you want to see in the game. And then we'll be sure to get those out. Get some of those out. Because these are fun to do. And I do enjoy making these, because then you get to learn a little bit about myself, and you get to learn a little bit about the game, because this will teach you, you know, I teach you little things about the tanks, and why I like them, and what I did with them. And I think that's a good way to learn as well in this game. But that's it. Thanks, guys, for tuning in. Happy Valentine's Day if you celebrate that. And I hope you guys all have a great weekend, because I'm going to be going over to my buddy's house, and we'll be recording another double tracked. Hopefully this time I won't mess up the audio. Well, once again, thanks, guys, for tuning in. And I will see you guys all later. Take care, everyone, and peace out.